Hello, welcome. I'm Nick Burgess, the Communications Director for the City of North Liberty. Every year we hold a project open house to talk about major improvements to key infrastructure that's coming up in the next couple of years. This is our final session in a series of 4. Previously, we've talked about parks and trail plans, improvements to Rancho Way from Zeller to Hawkeye Drive that are coming this year. We talked about the realignment of Dubuque Street there at Front and Cherry Street. That'll be happening next year. Those presentations are all available for you to watch at northlibertyiowa.org/projects. You can also find my contact information there to reach out with additional questions that you might have. Today, we're talking about the future of City Hall and the Civic Campus area there along Cherry Street, where the police station and fire station currently are, and where City Hall used to be. This again, will also be recorded just like the other ones and available afterwards. And you can get that at northlibertyiowa.org/projects, as well as sign up for email updates and get other news. So today we're talking, let's see, so we talked, hold on, let me switch here. I do have the right presentation stuff. So here's the past ones. Today we're talking about City Hall and the future of the Civic Campus. This is the little area that we're talking about. We're looking out and talking about City Hall and the future of the Civic Campus. If you have questions as we go through this presentation, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end. As they come to you, just put them in there. But first, I want to introduce the project team with me today. Today, we've got City Administrator Ryan Heiar. Hello, Ryan. We have Planning Director Ryan Rusnak.
Afternoon.
We have City Engineer Kevin Trom of Shive-Hattery. We have Architect Tandi Brannaman, also of Shive-Hattery. And we have Landscape Architect Emily Naylor, who is also of Shive-Hattery, and they're helping us on this project. So here's what the area we're talking about. Again, most people are pretty familiar with this. Here's a current aerial view. You can see the parking lot there that was added to expand Red's parking lot. You can see the police station, and you can see sort of the rest of that lot there. Ryan, I'd like to sort of talk a little bit of an overview and a little bit of history here as we get into talking about where City Hall started, what this Civic Campus area has been, and sort of why now. So let's talk first about sort of where we're coming from and the history of City Hall in North Liberty. All right. We've got some gorgeous photography here. This is the first City Hall that I'm aware of. Most people now know this as the entrance to the fire station. Our council chambers was here. Our police station was also sort of nestled in there. Did this predate you, or you had an office here too, didn't you?
This does predate me by several years. When I arrived in late 2007, the police station was in the front of this building, or the east side of this building. Fire station, of course, had the bulk of it, and the council chambers was also in this building. And actually, if I could speak a little bit more about the history, just going a little bit further back, in 2007, early 2007, again before my time here, the city council went through a facilities planning exercise and had a consultant come in and work with the staff team at the time. And they put together a list of 8 priorities, varying from Parks Department, Streets Department. City Hall was number 3 on that list, included the police station and some library and a library addition and a few others. And we've made some pretty good progress on that list, actually, over the years. And of course, as many people probably know, we added a significant addition onto the library 8 or 9 years ago. New park shop, new street shop, and of course, just opening our new police station this year. So one of the priorities that the council asked of me and the team when I got here was to look at this comprehensive study and start, implementing it, which we did. And as it turned out, the City Hall I wouldn't say took a back seat, but we put that project on pause. We did obviously lease a place, which is where we're at now, really so that the police station could have a little more space, City Hall as well. But the thought process was that we would be in this facility for 3 to 5 years, and now I think we're finishing out year 10 here. So we're ready to move forward now with this next version of next piece of the Civic Campus project. And how that came about really is, as we were looking for locations for a city hall, and the thought process would be a city hall police station at the time. We looked at a number of different projects or a number of different properties throughout the community, and we circled back to this piece where we're planning for now, really because we wanted to make sure and reinvest into the original part of the community. And there was concern about pulling City Hall out and putting it on Rancho Way, which was where everything was going. So the thought process is someday we want to be back in that original part of the community, and hopefully with our reinvestment we'll bring along investment on the private side as well. So that's kind of how we got I guess to the location point. Since that time, obviously a lot of things have changed. Priorities shifted. We recently did a study to look at purchasing this facility that's on the screen now and remodeling it. As it turns out, we estimated that cost to be about $6.3 million. Our budget going into a new city hall is $7 million. So not that far off, and the benefits obviously are much greater with a new facility, a new government building that we can build versus trying to make something into what we would want it to be. So again, that was another decision recently made by the city council, was okay, we know we need to look at a new facility, so let's start that design process. The current building we're in, we're leasing it for about $200,000 a year. When our lease is up and when we're in a new facility, that will actually free up some general fund money. It gets a little bit convoluted on how municipal budgets work, but that'll free up some general fund money, which is where we pay for Parks and Rec, public safety, library, a lot of the general focal points of municipal government. So that's another benefit that will be happening down the road. So I don't know, Nick, if there were other questions you wanted me to address, but I think that's hopefully an idea of how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, I think that's great. We did skip over the beautiful form, or the most recently police station. This was the city hall when you started. It was before that. It was like a pediatrician's office, really cramped space. There's a conference room that fits 2 people barely comfortably, 4 people if you really smush them in there. I'm being told I'm super quiet. Is this a little bit better? Can you folks hear me all right? Okay. Sorry about that. So this is the city hall. Most recently, before we moved into our temporary 3 to 5 year plan that we've been talking about for 3 to 5 years, over that 3 to 5 years. And now we're talking about new. So I wanted to bring in Ryan Rusnak to talk a little bit about municipal buildings and just sort of what they can mean to a community, and particularly that reinvestment piece into a community. So Ryan, you want to talk us through a little bit of sort of, as a planner, how do you see civic buildings adding to a community and really that placemaking that we keep talking about here?
Yeah, and so I kind of think that civic buildings are supposed to be kind of these anchors of a community, and then if you go through maybe all of the slides, and I'm always concerned with how like a building reads. How does it make you feel? Does it invite you? Is it intimidating? Right? Some buildings like a county courthouse are are really like intimidating, right? And I would argue that that's purposeful. But when I look at the three original buildings, the fire station building and then the old police station and the current building, it really doesn't scream to you like, anchor institution, municipal government functioning here. And so I think there's a great opportunity for that to happen. Then when you look at the police station, you're like, oh, okay, this reads like a police department. I know what kind of business I'm supposed to be doing here. And I just want to reiterate something Ryan said. It would be probably a lot easier to just go to a greenfield site like along Rancho or Penn Street or something like that and build a new city hall. But it's pretty cool that this was the original part of North Liberty and just kind of reinvesting in this area and continuing the placemaking, or what we call a community identity, in this area, I think is really important. And, on the surface, like you really want, in my opinion, like a city hall that welcomes the public, right? We want to welcome people. Like, sure, we do city business. You have to get a building permit, you have to pay your water bills, but you also want to draw people into these spaces so they can participate in public life and kind of convey what our community values are. And so I really hope we do that. And I also just want to add lastly that, you just shouldn't look at a building as being a functional building where I go in and get a building permit, right? It's also these spaces that are around it. And I'm sure Emily could talk a lot more on that, but these civic spaces. And so we look at it as being Civic Campus, not just City Hall or anything like that. It's these collection of public buildings.
Great. And I think I fixed my audio. I think we're a little bit better now too. Thank you, Lydia, for flagging that. So let's start talking a little bit about what we're actually looking at doing here. Ryan talked a little bit about placemaking. We just keep coming back and touching on this community identity piece, which we worked on a couple of years ago, and just keep coming back to that and how we're working that into everything we do. But I want to step forward to sort of the whole Civic Campus piece that we're talking about. Right. So here is the map, and maybe Kevin, you can talk us through sort of what these pieces are, and sort of this actually shows a few different projects going on, and maybe you can step us through what these are.
Sure. I think what I'm going to do is let me talk a little bit about the projects, then I'll turn it over to Emily.
Great.
And Emily can talk to you a little bit about some of the site considerations for this project and some of the constraints that we have to work with.
Great.
Well, what you see in yellow, that's what we call our Dubuque Street Phase 1 project. So I don't know how many of the viewers saw last week's episode, but we talked about Dubuque Street Phase 1. So we're going to be realigning and reconstructing a lot of these streets in direct vicinity to the new City Hall. That's everything in yellow. So when we do that, we're actually going to gain a little bit more space for the Civic Campus, which is a great thing. And that's the only project going on, by the way. we're going to have Rancho Way on the other side of town, but this is the only project that will be in direct vicinity to this project. Now, Emily, you want to talk a little bit about the constraints and the site planning?
Sure. Yeah, so this is it's an interesting site where we are, as Kevin said, creating some more space, sort of the upper right corner there of the public open space, the green area. Thank you, Nick. So we're trying to take advantage, and of that additional space, but also start layering in some of the site requirements. So functional things. We've got private access for the police station, and we look at it as sort of like concentric rings, or the center of the donut, sort of the more intimate spaces, the back of house. We're trying to keep those centered to the site, and then the more forward or public facing spaces on the perimeter. We have to consider things like, where's the water need to go? And you can see the overland flow arrow there. We have to make sure that water gets to the lowest point on the site. And, that's as simple as, a plastic bag that covers a storm intake. And if that fills up, we want water going that direction, not into a building. So details like that are pretty important. We know because the site is tight that we're going to be doing some under paving or under parking stormwater detention. So that all makes sense and starts to inform where the parking should go. And as Nick mentioned before, the parking lot that Reds was able to utilize that was on city property, having that parking kind of adjacent to their parking possibly works, in off hours. And then you start moving around and it starts to place the city hall building. And we have those orange arrows that start to define the view shed, as you're coming from these different directions. And now what will be this really interesting intersection. And you can start to feature and see this city hall building and really let that be that anchor that Ryan noted, that, a municipal building, a civic building, one that's welcoming from all directions, and then really as you come around the east side there, that public open space and how that might connect and potentially even into the future down to Cary Street, and just building on that vocabulary of parklet and enhanced hardscape, softscape spaces that we're starting to see in all the other projects that we're doing around town. The Dubuque Street roundabout and improvements around Centennial Park, and visions that are going to be coming on Penn and the new interchange. And so it's just really starting to tie in all those layers and what defines and makes North Liberty special. And that's really reaching back to that identity master plan, and of course the intersection improvements here. We'll need to just continue to layer those things in to reinforce.
Yeah, so this is a slide I pulled in from what we talked about last week when we were talking about parklets in the Dubuque Street realignment. So this is that slide. Again, don't get too stuck on the colors, but we've talked a lot about how can we make these spaces that are public and necessary interesting and have some character. And that's that identity part that we've been working to integrate throughout these projects. We talked about it at Ranch Hall Way. We talked about it with Butte Street. We've talked about it with Centennial Park, and that's just part of what we're working through. Tandi, I wanted to bring you in and just have you talk a little bit about how you're working with city staff to figure out how do you make a brand new city hall function? Lots of conversations and lots of questions and probing. And how do you help people who don't know what they want know what they want?
Thanks, Nick. That's a good question. As you know, from the past several weeks, that it involves a lot of information gathering. Of course, we're starting from nothing, right? There's absolutely nothing there. And we have to generate a solution that's going to meet the needs for both the people working in this building and the people conducting business in this building. So it's quite the process, and it really starts with a lot of information gathering on our end. So we ask a lot of questions and we do a lot of listening. We try to bring together the different stakeholders that are going to be not only adjacent to this facility, but also working within it. So having the police department involved in some of those conversations, having the fire department involved in some of those conversations, as well as really talking through how the employees are going to function and use this space. It's really a place of business. It's a workplace for people, and it's also a place of gathering for public and community events. So those are all very different types of functions, and they all have very unique needs. So it really involves extensive amount of gathering information from all of you that work in the different departments within the city, and also tying back to a lot of the things that Emily talked about. We also have to make sure that throughout this process of discussion with employees and the directors at City Hall is making sure that we're integrating some of those philosophies that have been brought through in the site elements, and making sure that what's making North Liberty special is also being integrated into this facility. Beyond that, we do a lot of space analysis. So we review your existing facilities, we review where you currently are, Nick, as well as where the legal department is, and all of those different groups of people, and determine how much space you're using today compared to how much space should you be using today, and then how much space are you going to need in the future. This is a really big project for the city. It's a focal point of the community, and we need to make sure that it's going to last the test of time. So that's not only in how we develop the building from an exterior standpoint, material standpoint, but also the space inside, and making sure that we are able to accommodate growth as you need it. Basically, as city is growing, City Hall is also growing. So those things all have to be taken into consideration. One of the things that we'll be doing in the future is also taking some site visits to other city halls in the general vicinity. We'll be doing that with our design team, as well as members of the admin team and all of you wonderful people working at City Hall. And we will see what other communities have been doing. We'll be looking for any sort of strategies or, trends that are happening right now, any other unique ideas that maybe other communities are bringing into their city halls. I know that as time goes on, as was mentioned, it's becoming more of a civic center. So there's a lot more integration of the community within the building, not just in the exterior. So looking at other facilities to see how did they bring those elements of community into the building while still being able to maintain security and things like that that need to be looked at for the employees in the facility. So there's a lot more time and effort. We're just right now in the information gathering stages, and we'll still have quite a bit of that left to go. Eventually, after gathering all of this information, we will start developing conceptual drawings that start to show what does this space actually look like? How do we convert all of that information into an actual building? And it'll start in a very kind of diagrammatic format like Emily showed with the site, and slowly get refined into things that start to look more and more and more like a building. And we'll start looking at things like, where is the city administrator's office? How large is the council chambers? What other types of elements do we need to have associated with those? Where is the front door? Those types of things. And then how does that relate to the site? And we'll start to develop that into tangible documents where everyone, city council, the public will start to get to see what this building is going to look like. And from there, we will also start to develop the exterior view of this facility. What kind of image does the city want to portray to the community, and those types of things. So it's quite the process, and we have a lot left to do before we get to that point, but it's an exciting time.
Can we talk then maybe just a little bit about sort of that basic timeline right now, right? Programming where you go and figure out how much space everybody currently has and how much they might need. What is that? What is the basic timeline for developing all these concepts look like?
Yeah, I can answer that, Nick.
Please.
As Tandi mentioned, right now we're in the programming and concept phase. So at the end of that phase, which hopefully will be in the next month or so, we're going to have the project defined. So we're going to have the program well defined and a good concept with a floor plan that city staff and we agree would make the most sense. And then in addition to that, we're going to have a schedule and some costs just to make sure this is within the ballpark of the budget, and then present that to the city council. And then once that has been approved, then we move on to our design process, which design through bidding generally takes 8 to 9 months. And the reason is because it is a process, and we go through a number of milestones just to make sure that we check in with city staff and they have a chance to review things along the way as kind of checkpoints. So our first phase is called schematic design. That's where we come to about, 30% design roughly. And then we submit that to staff and they review it. And we make sure that the scope still remains the same and the expectations are the same. And then we move on to the next phase. It's called design development. And that'll take the design up to maybe 65% complete. And then once again, we'll meet with city staff, review those plans, and then move on to the CD phase, and then eventually the contract document phase. So all that takes, if you add in bidding too, that all takes about 8 to 9 months to complete. But we're not quite ready to start the design, but we're getting close. We've had a lot of meetings with staff already, and I think we're really honing in on what we need to focus on for the concept. So I think we've got a really good site plan concept developed, and we're getting really close on the building too.
Great. So I think we've got a couple of questions that I think actually tie back to stuff that we should talk a little bit more about. The first is Brent asks, what ideas have been shared on how to incorporate the branding ideas, those community visioning ideas into that open green space, into that public open space? We had some of the stuff about the parklets, which I can go back to here. But Emily, maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, just in our, in our processes, we try to tie in, and we've got some, grandiose sketches that show full hardscape urban plaza, might not be what was programmed or in the budget yet. So we're going to certainly design a project that fits the city's budget, but then also maybe leaves room for growth or further development in the future. So we'll definitely be getting some identity and some textures, some hardscape elements, plant palette, opportunities for seating and respite, et cetera, but then leave ourselves room for further development. Really kind of shakes out on how much things cost. So.
Yeah, and it'll be an interesting balance, right? We want to be fun, we want to be interesting, but we also, we've talked a lot about how this is still a civic building, and we want it to not feel it's not a playland, right? And so we're going to have to find that balance too, I think, when it comes to how that looks, right?
Correct.
Hey, Nick, and I just want to add to is the site plan concepts that we've talked about, and it's been touched on, the realignment of the road provided this great opportunity. But we also want to make the building accommodate vehicles. You'll have parking, but also to have this element of, like, in the picture that you're showing right now is a wonderful example of this kind of this walkable old part of town community where it's easy for people to walk places or come across the street from the park. So we're really trying to discuss and emphasize that, it should be approachable City Hall from a pedestrian standpoint, but also from a vehicle standpoint. And that kind of helps fit it into the context of this area.
Great.
Yeah, it's from the outside in work that Ryan and I do as planners and some more site design. That's all really fun. But then we dish that challenge to Tandi, who's the architect that has to figure out a multiple faced building. We've got parking on one side and pedestrian access on the other side. It becomes challenging, with access control and things. So she's got a lot that she's trying to put in her head and get figured out. So it's going to be a great solution. It just is in the works.
Yeah. And one other question that Lydia has is about the. She asks, is it in the long-term plan to acquire the little white house, which I believe is actually called the White Building, that's between the public open space and Cherry Street? So this is right here. It's the one building that's still in that block, and it's a separate thing. And maybe this is a good question for Ryan, sort of how that fits into our plans.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah. Ideally, I'd like to see us get that piece of property down the road with the intention of removing that building. The challenge there is it's a historic building, and that doesn't prohibit us or prevent us from moving it or raising it, whatever it might be. But obviously, there would be some concern there just on how we go about that. But I think it makes a lot of sense for the city to eventually own that piece. So it pretty much owns the entire block. It'll just be a matter of timing and then transitioning and what to do with that current building.
Great, thanks. Another question from Lydia. With the goal of making this intersection walkable, really thinking about that whole area, what sort of techniques might we have to sort of help slow down drivers or encourage them to slow down to make it a little bit easier for folks to cross in? And this is maybe more of a question surrounding the Dubuque Street work rather than the City Hall work, but obviously these are all connected.
Maybe I should answer that. I think, Lydia, the only answer I have for you there is that we're gonna keep the existing four-way stop at Cherry and Dubuque, it's a very safe intersection, and it's functioning very well now, and we're going to keep that. So everyone has to stop at that 4-way stop. North Dubuque, there'll be a stop sign for North Dubuque only, but Dubuque Street and Front Street will be a through street.
Kevin, I know with like the right turn lane, at least on Dubuque, I mean, isn't the road actually being narrowed so it's a little safer for pedestrians to cross?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we're eliminating the southbound right turn lane on Dubuque Street to Cherry, and that'll make the road a little bit more narrow. So it's a shorter distance for the pedestrians to cross at both Dubuque Street and Cherry Street. So it'll be much nicer for pedestrians right there.
Great. Well, is there any last thoughts that folks want to add to this? This is obviously we're down the road. This is the most abstract one we've talked about so far. It's a lot different than talking about detours and full reconstructions. We're still in the early phases here, but the idea of bringing all of these civic buildings together and locating them in the original part of town and reinvesting in that area is something we've talked about for a long time. We've been acquiring that property for a long time, and it's good to be moving in that direction. I think city staff is excited. I think the community should be excited. I think it presents a really nice opportunity for us to really anchor right that end of Cherry Street with more civic buildings. We've got the community center on the other end of Cherry, and really have a nice reinvestment. Well, I will. With that, again, thank you so much for coming. This is the last of our. Oh wait, we've got one more question. This is from Dave. Have you looked at strengthening the pedestrian bike systems to extend to the rec center? This would provide an opportunity to connect to Dubuque Street Trail on 965. So I think Dave's looking at, have we talked about wide sidewalks or more trails sort of along Cherry Street at all? Is that on as somebody who bikes to work, which is here at the community center, and bikes along up Dubuque Street, I find that way pretty straightforward. Are there we did do some widening of Dubuque the Cherry Street sidewalk a couple of years back. Are there plans to extend that any farther?
I could jump in here, or Kevin.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I do believe it's part of our trails plan to extend that to the east, but also as we talk about our Cherry Street vision and some of the branding that Brent mentioned earlier, I see this as a big part of that. I mean, you just mentioned having 2 anchors on Cherry Street, and so absolutely, it makes a lot of sense to have them connect with a trail or a wide sidewalk of some sort. And so I think that's what we'll be looking at, continuing to focus on down the road. But it takes time. That's a fairly lengthy stretch, and there'd be a lot of easement acquisitions in there, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, a lot of property owners that we'd have a lot of conversations with before we did anything.
Yeah, we got a small chunk of it done in front of the community center, down to Liberty Center 2 years ago. But like Ryan alluded to, it is costly, and there will be easements involved, but it is on the CIP plan.
Great. Well, thank you all again for coming to all 4 of our virtual open houses in 2021. These will all be available again at northlibertyiowa.org/projects. My contact information so that you can reach out, ask me questions, get mad at me, there's my email address. It's nbergus@northlibertyiowa.org. And there's my direct line here at the office, 319-626-5756. If you go to northlibertyiowa.org/projects, you can also sign up to get emailed updates as those come out over the summer and the coming months. And as we have updates on these projects and, of course, future projects. Thank you so much again for joining us, and have a great, wonderful spring.